Hi, everyone. Yeah, thank you so much for participating, either as a postdoc or a student. I'm Amelia Juliet Demery. I'm one of the co-chairs for the Student Affairs Committee. This monthly series is a student-led event that is, this month has an excellent collaboration from the Early Professionals Committee of AOS. This monthly series is designed to promote more participation, engagement, and community building between different professional stages, but most importantly between early professional stages like students and postdocs, and across all non-academic tracks, especially during these isolating times when professional networking and community are really important for those of us in these stages. So before I send it off to the big leaders who have organized this, I just want to let you know that if you are a student and you don't know already, we have a student affairs Slack channel that promotes that engagement community for like all students. So if you would like to join, I'm going to post the link here. We have like daily goals, we have like research, diversity inclusion channels, we have channels for students who want to get more involved and organize the next month's monthly series. Just work on participation, work on conference stuff, you name it. So I'm just gonna put that plug in. Really happy to see you all. Please, Jenny and Mina, Teresa, take it away.
Awesome, thanks so much, Amelia. So thank you everyone so much for coming. We're just really excited by the number of people that are participating today. We had 54 participants sign up, and then we have 15 what I'm going to call postdoc experts that volunteered to help us understand postdocs a little bit more. So we've just been really blown over by the response, and we're really grateful to everyone for coming. I wanted to take a minute to highlight the student organizers that helped put together this event. So those include, of course, Amelia, who you just heard from, and then Mina Handmaker, Jen Houts, Teresa Pagan, and myself. So we hope this event is useful for all of you and that it's fun. So to give you a brief overview of how we're going to do this, for the first 40-ish minutes, we're going to have a panel discussion with questions that were pre-submitted by student participants and participants that are not necessarily still students. So just to clarify here, we have participants, and then we also have what I'm going to term postdoc experts. So those are those of you that volunteered to give your knowledge about your postdocs experience. And some of you are already in further positions, so you're no longer postdocs, but for the sake of today, I'm just going to refer to the group of you panelists and breakout room leaders as postdoc experts. So we're gonna have 40 minutes of a panel, and those are with 6 of our postdoc experts here. The panel will be going through questions that were pre-submitted by participants. We got a lot of really good questions, and we did our best to kind of condense them. Some of them were similar, but we have so many that we might not get to yours. So I really apologize if that's the case, but you will have the chance to ask any other questions that you have during our breakout room session. So those are gonna start at 12:45 and they'll go until 1:15. And there'll be groups of 5 to 6 participants with a postdoc expert, and you'll be able to have more in-depth one-on-one conversations to kind of have more of a casual take on what it's like to apply for postdocs and to be a postdoc. And then finally, for the last 15 minutes from 1:15 to 1:30, we're going to have a chance for postdoc experts to give one final piece of advice to the group, and then we'll thank everybody for coming and wrap it up. I think that's all I wanted to say. Oh, so just to note, for those postdoc experts that we're doing the panel with, I'm going to start asking questions from that pre-submitted list that I sent you guys in the Google Doc. And just a reminder, I've given you an order to answer in, so we don't have awkward people talking over each other in Zoom when there's delays in time. So hopefully we can avoid those problems today. Okay, so let's get started. Oh, one final thing, sorry. So if you have a question as a participant, we're gonna ask that you hold most of your questions until your breakout room session. So for the panel section that we're about to do right now, we have these pre-submitted questions that we're gonna be working with. And if you have like a burning question that you really want to follow up to, you can post it in the chat, and any of the postdoc experts present are welcome to respond. However, we kind of want to keep this panelist section to be just focused on the pre-submitted questions. So if you think your question can wait until the breakout room, then please hold your question until then. Okay, so let's get started. So our first question is for our panelists is, can you introduce yourselves, including your name, your current position, and a brief overview of your postdoc experiences? And we'll start with Fred. And Fred, you need to unmute yourself, I think.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Fred Benham. I'm a postdoc at the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology at UC Berkeley. This is my second postdoc in the same institution. The first was supported through a NSF postdoctoral research fellowship, and now the second is supported by state initiative, the California Conservation Genomics project.
Hi, I'm Jessica Hightower, and I'm a postdoc at University of Maine, where I'm going to be working on golden winged warbler population modeling and coming up with a population viability analysis for across their entire range. So I'm a new postdoc, and what I'll bring to this, I guess, is, you know, the last year of my PhD was a mad rush to write the dissertation and hunt for the postdocs. And so apologies, I'm zooming in from a parking lot right now. The snowstorm has delayed my travels, so I am about 6 hours away from no longer working remotely and finally being in Maine.
Hey, I'm Michelle Husino. I did a couple of, oh, sorry, I'm supposed to tell you where I am right now. I am at William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. I just started a visiting assistant professorship here in the fall. I did technically 3 postdocs, really 2. One was in Madison, Wisconsin, working on bats and fungi. And the other was at the University of Florida, working on ambrosia beetles and fungi. You might say those aren't birds. I do actually work on birds, but I think what I really bring to the table here is looking at a wide group of subjects and thinking about kind of how that really will make you a stronger researcher, regardless of whether or not you want to go into, you know, solely a research job or a faculty job or an industry or NGO or something like this.
Hi, everyone. I'm Desiree Narengo. I'm currently a David H. Smith Conservation Research Fellow. I'm based at University of Massachusetts Amherst. I also work really closely with the U.S. Forest Service Northern Research Station. Right now, I'm working on a project looking at habitat and diet relationships of migratory birds using urban forests in New England. Prior to this project, through the fellowship, I did a 2-year postdoc at City University of New York, one that I applied for. And that was looking at how urbanization and yard landscaping impacts bird and insect communities. So I'm here to answer questions about fellowships and working with federal agencies and anything I can offer to the table.
Hey everybody, my name is Brian Treveline and I'm a postdoc at the Lab of Ornithology. I'm a Rose Fellow working on the influence of the gut microbiome on avian physiology, specifically migratory physiology. This is my second postdoc, but my first fellowship. My first postdoc with Kevin Cole at the University of Pittsburgh was my first foray into gut microbiome work. And that was just a position that I was hired on for under his startup, so I applied for that position. But yeah, happy to help however I can.
Hi, I'm TJ Zunzel. I'm a research ecologist with the USGS Wetland and Aquatic Research Center in Lafayette, Louisiana. Within the last month, I'm actually no longer a postdoc. I have a real permanent job now, but I postdoced over the last 5 years and had about 4 different postdoc positions between University of Southern Mississippi doing some radar ornithology to University of Illinois doing some shorebird ecology, then to back to University of Southern Mississippi, and then to USGS as a term position before then getting the permanent position I have now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. So our next question, we got a lot of questions about that were similar to this. At what point in your PhD should you start looking for a postdoc? And just a reminder to panelists, feel free to pass on the question if it's already been answered sufficiently or if you don't have anything to add. But we definitely want to hear from you if you have specific thoughts on every question.
I think I go first for this one. I will just say from my experience, I started a year ago today, and it took me a year to get the postdoc. I literally finished my dissertation, graduated, did not have a job in December, and then I got one. So I applied for a lot, and it took me a while. So start soon.
So I think for my first postdoc, I started looking probably 8 or 9 months in advance. I'm classically kind of a last minute person, which I probably shouldn't say on recording, but I applied to a fellowship and did not get that, but that was very helpful in helping establish a connection with a researcher who I was very interested in working with, and I ended up getting a postdoc in their lab through another pot of money that he had. And so I would say, you know, even if you're not super excited about funding rates and stuff like this, building connections early, right, is really really good. And I think for a lot of folks who get postdocs coming right out of their PhD, regardless of their area of expertise, right? A lot of these are based on connections that we have made or other collaborators that we have made.
I graduated in May of 2018, and I started looking, I think, in fall of 2017. Like Michelle said, it's great for building connections, especially if you want to apply for fellowships. You want to start getting the gears of those proposals going early. But in terms of applying for jobs, I actually think that some of the things I applied for, I was at a disadvantage because they wanted people to start right away to do field work or to come to their lab. And I wanted to postpone things until I finished because I had funding until May of 2018. So that's something to keep in mind if you do start really early. I ended up not finding something that would work with my schedule until I think March of 2018. And they wanted someone to start like ASAP, and I was able to negotiate a June start date instead. So when you're applying to those jobs that are advertised, that's something to keep in mind, that it could be that it happens last minute, like right when you're finishing up, or you have to end early.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything Desiree just said. I think that with fellowships, you need to plan a little bit earlier, and understanding that you may or probably won't get it the first time. And so if you had one cycle to practice, and then your second application should be stronger, and places usually favor repeat applicants depending on where you're applying. So for fellowships, I think I applied to one like maybe a year and a half before I was planning on graduating, and then didn't get it, and then reapplied the next year and didn't get that either. But regardless, it was a little bit early. And then for the positions that are advertised, yeah, you probably can get a little bit of wiggle room, like 6 months or something like that. But usually those people who post those, they want the position to be filled relatively soon. And so that is a little bit stressful because you're finishing up and you might not have something lined up, you know, even a few months before you finish. So, but that's sort of that time frame in which you'd probably need to apply to something. But in any case, you should, if you're thinking about doing a postdoc, you can think about it in advance when you meet people or whenever you're reading research that you really like and you're inspired by, and you think like, oh, I'd really like to work with that person. The earlier you start thinking about that, I think the better.
Yeah, I'd say like a lot of the others, I started looking for a postdoc about 1.5 years before I graduated. Now that said, I actually ended up starting my postdoc before I actually graduated. So I graduated in the spring of 2016. I started my postdoc in January of 2016. So kind of started a little bit before finishing.
Yeah, I agree with most of the things that have been said. I guess, yeah, I think it's really variable depending on what the kind of postdoc position it is. I think regardless of what you apply for, fellowships or actual like already funded job on the PIA's grant, it's great to network with people at conferences or visiting speakers. And any postdoc offer I got was from people I had already met in one of those situations. And I applied for a fellowship, I guess it was, well, the deadline was a year before I started. So that, but yeah, so fellowship's definitely a year and a half before the end of your PhD or before you plan to start a postdoc. And then the other positions much later, whenever they get advertised and when you're available.
Wonderful. So Fred's response actually leads really well into our next question, which we got a lot of questions similar to this one. So specifically, we got a lot of questions about finding postdocs and how to contact prospective postdoc labs. So how did you find your postdoc or postdocs, and what methods do you recommend for searching for postdocs?
So I think I'm first on this one. So my first postdoc, I found, as I said, I had applied to a fellowship with the individual that I was working with, and so he let me know when he had money and said a position's opening, you know, your top candidate. So that was very lucky. My second postdoc, I found. Well, I was invited to apply to that one too, but it was advertised on Twitter. Twitter is a big place where I see a lot of postdocs advertised now. I know that does not work out super well for everybody. Not all of us are huge social networkers, but even if you're a social networking wallflower, you have to keep an eye on it, because a lot of people now, for whatever reason, are only posting things on places like Twitter. Ecolog is really great. The Texas A&M job board, I don't know if folks know about this. I can post a link in chat here in a minute, or someone else can. But that's kind of like, you know, you got to keep an eye on these boards. On the fellowships, I would ask somebody senior to you in your lab, or somebody senior to you that you trust, if they have a nice list of fellowships that they kind of had been keeping an eye on and stuff like this. That's something that I do for the graduate students in my lab. I have a Google Doc for them. And I think that's a really important thing to do.
So everything Michelle said, definitely Twitter. I'll say that for the first postdoc I applied for, I saw the ad on Twitter, and I liked the project, but I didn't think that the host PI was a good fit for me. But I knew someone else who worked on that project. So I emailed them and was like, do you think there'll be any opportunities in the future? And my supervisor wrote back and was like, yes, I'll keep you in mind. And so, you know, whatever you can do to get your name out there that you're looking, tell all your friends, tell all the people you collaborate with, so that if something does come up, they can, you know, keep you in mind. And when I was contacting people, you know, just kind of like cold email, you know, something short and sweet. Here's my CV. This is what I'm interested in. This is why I think your lab would be a good fit. Do you know of any opportunities in the future? Sometimes a faculty member might say, oh, we actually have this postdoc here, this postdoc fellowship that you had never heard of. You know, a lot of universities have their university specific ones. And so they might point you in the right direction to try to find you money, or may have a different project in mind with another collaborator. Someone I cold contacted said, I don't have money, but my friend does. Here, let me put you in touch with him. So that would be my suggestion, would be to just get yourself out there and network and try to contact as many people as possible in addition to Twitter and these job boards.
Yeah, so for me, what ended up happening, I had this idea that I wanted to move from diet metabarcoding work into gut microbiomes and sort of link the two. And I didn't really know anybody at the time to like help me with that project. And I wanted to apply for an NSF postdoc fellowship. And so looking back, I probably didn't do it in the right way, but I just started reaching out to people in Pittsburgh where I was at the time and asking them for their thoughts. And I met with a guy who did microbiome work, and he sort of told me like, okay, well, I can't really help you with this, but there's this new faculty coming in at Pitt and you should talk to him. And then we talked about submitting an NSF postdoc fellowship. And then by the end of discussing the fellowship application, he basically offered me a job, because at that point we had worked together for months putting together a proposal. And so it was just sort of serendipitous, and it kind of just worked out in that way. But it sort of started from this sort of cold email, sort of emailing people that could maybe help me get on the right track. And then it turned into a position because of like what Desiree said, was like, I don't have money, but somebody else I know does. And so it's there's like a whisper network of jobs out there within universities that never even get posted. So sometimes it's really a good strategy just to talk to as many people as possible about your ideas and your projects.
Yeah, I would say a lot of what folks have already said is true. Now, I don't tweet. I don't have a Twitter. The only tweet I hear are the birds outside. So that's not something I use. But I know Ornithology Exchange. I don't think anyone mentioned that. That's a place that I looked, but never really had much luck. Otherwise, I just really sent a lot of people emails. The 2015 AOU COS meeting, I think I met every professor there to basically try to get something worked out. But a lot of the responses I got were, I'd love to have a postdoc and you'd be great if you have some money that you could bring with you. So that was the answer I got a lot. And actually that's how I ended up funding my own funding for most of my postdocs, except for one.
Yeah, I guess I'll echo a lot of what's been said, but I don't think anyone's mentioned Evil Dur yet. That's an evolutionary biology postdocs jobs board that's worth keeping your eye on. And I found several positions I applied to and one I got but didn't take there. Yeah, word of mouth is great. Doing some research on what fellowships are out there, the NSF, PRFB, postdoctoral research fellowships in biology. There's the biological collections one is unfortunately no longer an option. That's the one I got. But there's also a broadening participation, which I think is still available, which is initiative to do research, but also focus a lot more on the broader impacts, like bringing in minoritized groups into biological research. And then I think the Orders of Life is the new program, which I'm not quite aware of. And then there's one on plants, which won't be as relevant to this group, I don't think. And then a lot of schools have fellowships that are worth looking at. I can't offhand think of a single place where you can go and look up the postdoc fellowships of individual schools, but I know UC Davis, UC Berkeley has them. There's the Rose Fellowship at Cornell. There's Michigan Life Science Fellowships. There's some research you can do there too.
Yeah, like a lot of people said, Twitter. I found my job was initially posted on Twitter months before they were able to officially advertise for it. So I kind of got in there a little bit earlier than the official application. This past year has seen a huge drop from what I'm hearing, in postdoc jobs that have been advertised. I'm really hoping that we'll bounce back up soon. But one of the areas that I saw was there still seemed to be a lot of European postdocs that were being advertised. And Twitter seemed like a place that I could find those jobs that weren't being posted on some of the other job boards. So I applied for a couple in Europe and I interviewed for several. And those were just those were mostly from Twitter. And one of the tricks that I figured out, because I was just paranoid about, missing one, I would go to the Twitter search and type in postdoc ecology. And that seemed to cast a wide enough net that I was picking up quite a few advertisements that way. So that would be my tip on the Twitter front. I also did the fellowships where that takes up a bit of time when you're writing a dissertation as well. So the fellowships out there, there's a Google Doc floating around out there where someone has kept a list of all of the fellowships for the schools. I'm not sure where it is, but I see it. I can forward it on.
Great, thank you, everyone. So our next question, I'll ask panelists to just give a quick reaction to, so we can get on to some of these other questions. Our question 4 is, how important is having publications for getting a postdoc?
Okay, my quick reaction is that it depends, right? So publications are great, but people recognize that you're finishing your PhD, they're probably in progress. So whatever you can do to show that you're a finisher is key. So whether that's publications, preprints, having a website that talks about your different potential products that are coming out of your work, those are some potential alternatives. And I also want to point out that in the case of fellowships, publications aren't the only thing that they're looking for. I get questions all the time about the Smith and whether it's even worth it to apply if you don't have high impact publications. And the answer is always yes, because they're looking at so much more than that. They're looking at your service, your teaching, your DEI. That's my short.
Yeah, my initial reaction is that I think it's important. It was definitely one of the very first things that my first postdoc advisor asked me when he was considering hiring me. It was, what is the status of my manuscripts? Meaning that, basically, I think he was trying to assess how much of my time would be devoted to finishing up loose ends versus the new projects and balancing those, because it is a challenge. And then for my second postdoc, that it was a fellowship, and I assumed that it was important, but there were other factors. But if you can get your papers out in preprints and show that your progress, that you've made progress, and that exactly what Desiree said is that you can finish projects that you start, I think that probably is sufficient.
Yeah, just publications are pretty important, at least from my experience, as well as finding grant funding, even if it's small amounts of money from AOS or Wilson or any of these other small kind of opportunities.
Yeah, I guess I'd agree. I wouldn't say it's essential, but publications are still a very important currency, especially in the academic side of science. So it's definitely going to be to your benefit to get your stuff out sooner rather than later. And I am still working on my PhD publication, so it's but the more you can do, the better you'll be in shape you'll be in.
I will say I had a publication for my master's, and I've had some smaller side projects during my PhD, but I have not published any of my dissertation chapters right now. And I was really worried about it going into applying for postdocs, that was going to really hold me back. And I don't think it did. With the dissertation now, that is done. But I applied for an NSF fellowship and I didn't get it, but I talked to the program officer about it, and it didn't come up in any of the comments of the program officer, so lack of publications on there. So that was that. And I had a couple of interviews, and those that never came up either. Just my intent to publish my dissertation came up. So I think I'm in a nice sweet spot right now where people don't necessarily expect me to have my dissertation published, but I do expect that for this next jump, whether it's a postdoc or a permanent job after this, that will be much more important if I still don't have dissertation chapters published. So as some of the other panelists said, it's important to show that you can finish projects, but I think people do realize where you are in your life stage.
I'll echo that a little bit. I think realizing that like getting things finished is good. Also realizing that the peer review process takes just a long time sometimes. I had 2 or 3 papers stuck in review when I finished my PhD and when I got my first postdoc offer. But I think having shown that, like, yes, you know, you can make it through the submission process, you can get through the first round of reviews, et cetera. I think that's probably important for at least, you know, 1 or 2 things. I think it's okay if they're not completely all the way through yet, but it really depends on who you want to work with and what you want to do. But also for this, my second position at University of Florida, I think if I hadn't had papers out by then, there's no way I would have gotten that job. Sorry, my dog is whining in the background. I'll stop.
Thank you, everybody. So we're going to skip question 5 for the panelists, and we're going to go straight to question 6. So we had a question from a participant. If I ultimately want to end up in a non-academic position, how should I approach applying for postdocs?
So I guess I'm in a non-academic position. So it's kind of similar to just, at least with USGS, it was similar to academia, just contacting people. And I had been working with some of the folks from the center I ended up at, and also knowing how to navigate USA jobs is huge if you want to go into a federal position. And happy to answer questions of people I personally, you know, one-on-one questions if anyone has them, happy to answer those.
Yeah, I think I have limited advice here because I'm still hoping to attain an academic position. But I think even if you end up with a more traditional postdoc, but not necessarily planning on going into academia, I think being upfront with your postdoc advisor about what you want to do, they may have opportunities in addition to research. I think there's also a lot of teaching postdoctoral fellowships or DEI type, centered type postdoc fellowships out there at different schools that are worth looking into too. But yeah, others will.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm going the academic route, so I don't have a lot of advice. I will echo that one big hurdle. I did apply for a USGS job, didn't get it, but I made it all the way to the hiring desk. So I was very proud of that because my resume didn't trip any of their flags. And it was the first time that I'd gotten it through. But I talked to someone about it and I figured out how to actually get through that initial process. So I think that's worthwhile.
So I think I think TJ said this too, it really depends on the type of position that you would want, which type of non-academic position you have. I had a federal postdoc for 2 years, was one of these USGS or USDA, sorry, Forest Service GS11 positions. The mistake that I made there is thinking like, okay, you know, if you end up in the federal system, you'll be sort of top of the line or top on the list for the next position that comes up. Promises of positions are made, et cetera. And the federal system is, you know, it's hard to navigate sometimes, at least in the Forest Service. I think USGS is a bit different. But I think it ultimately depends on like what it is you want to do, right? So if you want to continue doing research and you have a research postdoc position that comes up, then, you know, even if it's academic and you want a non-academic job, ultimately, like perhaps it's a good fit. And it's really something you have to ask yourself, and ask yourself if the person that you're working with would be a good mentor for you too.
Yeah, so I would say in terms of federal positions, if you want to work for USGS or Forest Service, then find somebody that's working in those agencies. So I recently interviewed for a USGS position, and every single person asked me what my experience was working with USGS. I was like, none. But so getting your foot in the door is key. For other things like fish and wildlife and nature conservancy and things like that, it'd be really good for you to contact folks that have those kind of positions that you want and see what kind of skills they're looking for, because the skills in an academic transect of going for as many big grants and papers as possible may not translate into the skills that they're looking for, such as things like structured decision making and communication and policy efforts. So contact those folks, figure out what skills you need before you start looking on your search. And if you do find somebody that's in a university setting, see who they're connected with. Are they connected with these non-academic collaborators that they can get you, in some good positions for collaborations yourself?
I don't have too much to add, so in the interest of time, I'll pass.
Awesome. Okay, so now thinking about the transition from a PhD to a postdoc position, we had a question: what should I be thinking about in the transition from a PhD to a postdoc? What are the differences in how you treat your job as a PhD student versus as a postdoc?
Yes, I'm first there. Yeah, during the transition, I mean, if it's a luxury, but if you can take some time off, that would be the first thing to do between PhD and postdoc, because I was pretty burnt out after my PhD and was thankful that I had some time. Focusing on getting publications out would be a big one. There's going to be, depending on how different your new position is from your PhD, there's going to be a lot of time catching up on literature. That could be important time during the transition. What was the second part of the question? What are the differences? I think that, yeah, the differences are going to be really variable across postdocs. If you have a fellowship and your own money, you have a tremendous amount of independence. You have a lot more time than you have during a PhD, so that's a plus. But yeah, you're sort of expected to be more independent or responsible, have greater responsibility within the lab, I think, in general. But yeah.
I don't have a lot to add to this because I'm just now transitioning. I will say it's awesome to be starting with a blank slate. All that fresh literature review and stuff, and new computer, new files. It's yeah, that one part's fun. So I'm just gonna listen to everyone else at this point.
So I'll echo the independence. You are definitely expected to be much more independent depending on who your advisor was for your PhD. You may have had variable independence, but usually in postdocs, you kind of take the position as sort of a leader in the lab. You have interesting mentorship opportunities with grad students within the lab. Sometimes that can be a little bit too much, right? And sometimes it's like just the right amount. And so finding this balance and like keeping in good contact with your PI is I think incredibly important. And I mean, of course, that's important in your PhD too, but you kind of have a different relationship with your PI. I really started looking for money more and because I like to have a lot of things going at the same time. So of course you have to work on your postdoc project, right? The thing that's funding your postdoc, be it through your fellowship or through your PI's grants. But if you want to have other things going, you've got to often fund those yourself. And then of course you really start hunting for that permanent position, right? Like these postdoc positions always have an end date. And when that end date starts encroaching like 8 or 9 months down the line, you start looking for the next thing, and that's invariably stressful.
I don't have much to add except for being a postdoc is a lot lonelier than being a PhD student because you sort of like hole yourself up in your office and you're like doing your thing. And so you have to make a real active effort to, at least in my experience, to ingrain yourself into the department, to meet people, to get involved in different projects and things like that. But it's worthwhile.
In terms of the transition, just thinking about how you're going to balance you know, you're tying up your loose ends from whatever is being held over from your dissertation, and with your new projects, somebody mentioned like you're going to be expected to work on that project. So and the majority of your time. So thinking about how to manage your time better. And in general, I would say that that's probably the biggest difference between my PhD and my postdoc, is being better about time management and being a little bit better about self-care and just like making sure I take time off and stuff. Because, you know, as you get to the end of your dissertation, I think it was Fred who said that getting burned out is real, and you know, trying to avoid that as much as possible is better. And if you can take some time off, definitely do that. I took a month off, and it really helped reset.
Yeah, I would say, you know, like a lot of other people said, you want to, you got a lot more independence. But I think one thing that's important when you're going from your PhD to your postdoc is that, you know, in your PhD, you're learning how to do science, right? And learn how to publish papers, that whole kind of gamut. But as a postdoc, you should try to identify, you know, what new things you're gonna learn or what new techniques. So each of my postdocs I found, you know, had a new tool essentially to put in my toolbox that helped get me, you know, along in my career. And so I'd say that'd be the one thing to try to take advantage of and ask yourself, you know, what am I you know, really trying to get out of this position that I'm in right now?
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. So obviously there's so much more we could talk about, but I think we only have time for one more question. So we're going to jump straight to question 12 for the panelists. And note, panelists, I changed the order of the answers here a little bit because I know some of you need to leave right at 12:45. So the final question that we'll answer in the panel section is, how has your postdoc career benefited you professionally and personally? And we'll start with Desiree.
I'm muted. Yeah, I mean, it's benefited me a lot. It's, you know, allowed me to establish myself as a researcher, and what brand of science that I'm bringing to ornithology. I've met a lot of collaborators. I've gotten to learn what it means to work on interdisciplinary teams. I learned new analytical skills. I learned new taxa. Like, it's a great opportunity, like TJ was just saying, to learn new things and to make a name for yourself in your field.
Yeah, professionally, it's just this period of time in which you can establish like what your interests are to the broader community, and build on the things that you're interested in, and getting all of the help that you need, ideally, and all new skills and such. Lots of professional development and grant writing, and you know, you're spending more time in academic departments, and so you're seeing other talks, or you know, other fields of research, and so you're just broadening your scientific horizons much more as a postdoc. And you've kind of got over the dissertation, and so you can sort of focus on a new thing, and it's kind of a nice reset, and you have a whole skill set from your dissertation to lead you through that. And personally, I think that something that is pretty clear right away is that when you make the transition from a PhD to a postdoc, like in terms of like your interactions with faculty and things, they seem to change a little bit. It's not as though you're treated so differently. Well, at least maybe in my experience I was in some ways, but moving to a new institution and getting a fresh perspective and everything, people just I don't know, it's sort of like a different perspective. Like you get sort of more camaraderie with faculty and other postdocs, and graduate students like sort of look up to you, and it's a new fun experience overall.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a good way to network and meet people. Like I said, you know, I had 4 different postdocs. I lived in 4 different places in a span of about 5 years, and got to know a lot of different people and a lot of different experiences. And I would say also, given, you know, the independence, you generally have a little more time, and I use the time to really try to get publications out, which obviously is going to help get you a job, a permanent job in the future. So I would say just, yeah, try to use time wisely for sure.
Yeah, I think I'm next. Yeah, it's professionally, it's yeah, I'll say it's a lot of fun being a postdoc, especially relative to PhD, which was fun too. But you have a lot more freedom to explore new ideas, establish yourself. It's been really great opportunity to get involved in bigger scale collaborative projects and more as, yeah, as a part of that team. And also just, yeah, lots of more time mentoring grad students, often just informally with like stats help, things like that. But yeah, you get more responsibility and that can be a lot of fun. And yeah, I mean, personally, I've been really lucky in my postdoc. The Museum of Vertebrate Zoology has been a really great place to be a part of. So it's also, yeah, it's been really fun, even during the pandemic. So.
Well, I could say what I'm hoping to get out of mine. I'm a month and a half in, and my PhD was very heavy into tropical community ecology stuff. And I thought a major gap was in, I wanted to know more about population ecology and modeling. And so I feel very, very fortunate that this postdoc is just letting me dive head into all these population models. So that's what I'm expecting to get out of it, is a load of modeling experience in this subfield. And it's a very collaborative project, so it will give me more experience with that. And that's kind of what I targeted. For the postdoc, I had either, something that would continue my my dissertation work in Borneo, which would have been great. Otherwise, I just wanted to do something that would give me a completely different set of skills. And so I had either of those options were good with me. And I'm happy to be learning something new.
Yeah, I echo pretty much all of that. The only thing that I would again stress is, like, I use my postdoc times as times to really add tools to my toolbox. So I wasn't as system specific, right? So I jumped from birds to bats to beetles, but the whole time I was kind of keeping in mind, like, okay, what do I need to learn to be able to come back to these questions in the bird world that I'm really interested in exploring. And so I kind of searched for folks who are working on questions that were similar to the questions that I wanted to explore, but not necessarily using the same study organisms, right? And so that was one huge benefit to me, and also the mentorship of graduate students has been really nice for me too.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. That was super informative. We're going to move into the section of this event now where we're doing breakout rooms. So in just a couple of minutes, Mina is going to send us to breakout rooms. There are 4 to 5 people total, including the breakout room leaders in each room. And just a note to breakout room leaders, there's a lot of questions that we didn't get to in the panel discussion. And so if you're looking for a conversation starter, that might be a good place to start. It's in the Google Doc that I sent everybody. And a reminder that we'll probably bring people back from breakout rooms around 1:15. So Mina, I think you can go ahead and send people in.
All right, here we go.
Teresa just reminded me we are starting recording again at this point. Awesome, thank you. Okay, so for the final couple of minutes here, we're gonna give all of our postdoc experts a chance to give one final piece of advice to our participants who are looking for postdocs or who are trying to navigate postdocs or thinking about navigating postdocs. So I've, in the Google Doc for our postdoc experts, I've created a list of the order that we'd like you to share your advice in, just to avoid people having to figure out who will speak next. I just did it by alphabetical order for your first name. So we'll start with Anusha. And if you are not a panelist, so if you're a breakout room leader, please take a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds to just introduce yourself and where you are. And then we'd like everyone to limit their advice to just a sentence or two because we want to make sure that everyone has time to give their advice. So we'll start with Anusha.
Hi everyone, I'm a postdoc at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and I'm happy to be here. I study hummingbirds. My only advice is that, okay, two things. One, own what your path is. If you can convince yourself that you're doing something right, and you should, then you can convince other people. And that's the main thing. Don't worry too much about if you're doing things the right way. That's it, yeah. Blake.
My name is Blake Jones. I just started a full-time faculty position at Bennington College this past fall. And I study behavioral endocrinology and ecophysiology. And so my advice is that take some very, very serious introspection time and figure out three things. Figure out an honest evaluation of your own capabilities, your career goals, and your personal goals, and plan accordingly. You don't want to end up spending a decade's worth of work finding yourself in an R1 position and feeling miserable because you don't have enough time for your personal life. And there's a whole other different combinations in between.
I think that's me now. Yeah, I think the one thing that really that you should all keep in mind, I think, is just for the next position that you have, your postdoc, expand your ideas and think about what new skills you want to learn and how that's going to translate into your terminal position. But it's important to know that postdocs are short. They're 2 to 3 years, and they usually have finite periods of funding. So definitely manage your projects and plan your projects with all of that in mind, because it goes really fast. And so if you're doing field work, for instance, try to do it in the beginning and then give yourself a year and a half to a year to do the writing and analysis, because yeah, there's always new things to do, and there'll be other ways that your time will be allocated to. So that's my advice.
Hi, I'm Elsie Sjogren. I'm about 6 months out of my PhD and into a postdoc at the University of Rochester, where I'm looking at hybrid zones. And I think my advice would be to not be afraid to reach out to people who are doing things that you're interested in. I know it's going to be more challenging in the current state of affairs, but that's definitely been key for me, is just starting those conversations and seeing what opportunities arise.
Hi, I'm Jacob. I'm finishing up a remote postdoc at the Norwegian University of Life Sciences, and I'll be starting a new postdoc in the spring at Cornell. Honestly, my biggest piece of advice, aside from things that people have already said, is that like, you don't have to do a postdoc. If you want to end up on an academic track, maybe you do. But the only reason to be on that track is if you're really having fun with it. And if you're not, go get a job outside of academia that pays you more money. As you think about postdocs as well, it's so easy to fall into like thinking about the postdoc that's going to angle for some faculty job that you may or may not get. And don't let that like make you miserable while you're a postdoc. The only reason to do this is if you're enjoying it.
Hey, I'm Jared. I'm a postdoc at Mississippi State, working on using UAS to monitor wildlife, and particularly birds in airport environments. I'll just give some advice for, since we mostly have grad students here, I'll give advice about becoming discouraged. Don't become discouraged if you don't get that first postdoc, or that postdoc that you really wanted. Keep applying and keep pursuing your goals. Reach out to faculty, government scientists if you have to, and talk with them about what's available. And sometimes there are things that may not necessarily be advertised. They may have funding for something that's coming up, and they can keep you in mind. So yeah, just don't get discouraged. Keep applying for those positions.
So my name is Jonathan Valente. I am a postdoc at Oregon State University, and I look at a number of factors driving marbled murrelet population declines in the Pacific Northwest. I would say I don't know if this is advice, but the thing that I feel like has not been said yet by the panelists is that postdocs are fun. I really enjoy this phase of my career because I get to just focus on research that I'm interested in. I don't have the like paperwork and supervising and faculty meeting headaches that my advisor deals with. I don't have the classes that the graduate students have to deal with. So I really enjoy being a postdoc. And I was telling people in my group, I don't really have a whole lot of motivation to move on from where I'm at right now because I enjoy what I'm doing. Maybe others would disagree with me, but I just thought that hadn't been said yet.
Yeah, I don't know if I have unique advice, but yeah, definitely focus on thinking about what you want to do, both career-wise and research, or what type of career and what type of research you want to do, and think about how different postdoc positions will sort of help you towards that goal and maybe flesh out your skill set or knowledge base and things like that. And yeah, as Jonathan says, postdocs are great. You have really the only time in our careers where we can just dive into research if that's what you love to do. So take advantage of it and look forward to it if you want to keep going on that track and explore new research ideas. You might, yeah, find yourself going a different direction. So.
Hi, my name's Sabrina. I'm a postdoc at Cornell and I've been here for about 2 years. My advice is a little bit counter to some things that we've been talking about, and that's to be pretty broad in your thinking about the future. And that comes from the fact that a large majority of people who get PhDs in ecology and evolution do postdocs, but only a minority of us will end up in tenure track faculty positions. And so even though a lot of us have been talking about and are very focused on advice for getting that professor job, in reality, a lot of us are going to end up in different places for a lot of different and valid reasons. And so more and more, especially because the faculty market is like dismal right now, and I know lots of good people who aren't getting jobs, I would say consider what things make you happy and what's important in your life, and try and do a postdoc that gives you options and lets you build skills that you can do a lot of different jobs with.
Hey, I'm Sean. I'm a postdoc at Thompson Rivers University in British Columbia. I'm kind of at the end of the list here, so I don't really have too much to add as far as new advice for folks. I would definitely echo what Jonathan said. I think that it's important to really try to embrace really wherever you are in your career, just embrace that experience and try not to get too distracted by, applying for a ton of jobs or, trying to chase a ton of grants. Just really try to embrace the experience that you're in, because I think you're going to get a lot out of that. And then the other thing I would just say is, as far as trying to network during a pandemic, I think that getting involved in societies is a really good way to do that. So if you're interested in joining a committee as part of AOS or Wilson, I think that's a really good way to network during a pandemic when we're not going to conferences to meet people.
I think there's been a lot of great advice already. I guess the only thing that I would add is some advice I got when I finished my PhD, that you'll never be any less busy than you are right now at this moment. And I think that's a good thing to think about, because there's some days now I spend like more time doing administrative work than research. So definitely enjoy the postdoc. It was definitely the most rewarding experience I've had so far in my career.
And I'm last, so I don't know how creative mine will be, but I guess just realize that sometimes life doesn't work out the way you think it will. So I had my 5-year plan and it did not work out at all the way I thought it would. But in the end now, so I had like a very, very short postdoc. But in the end, I ended up in a job that I really love where I'm teaching at a pretty nice university. So it worked out. But when I first was getting ready to graduate, I was doing everything that the panelists had said, networking and emailing and going to conferences and looking for grants and fellowships, and I didn't get anything right at all until several years later, where I just happened to be emailing somebody and he happened to offer me a position. It was very serendipitous the way it worked out. And I think that's just how a lot of times it works out. So like Jared said, don't get discouraged. Just keep on keeping on. And yeah, I guess that's my advice.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. That is perfect timing. We're right at 1:29. So I just want to take a minute to thank everyone so much for participating. This has been wonderful. Thank you especially to our postdoc experts for responding to the email we sent out and volunteering your time and advice so freely. And with that, I guess we can end the event officially. Thank you everyone again for coming.